What's up, YouTube? So, in this video, I'm going to be going over all of the Miami Dolphins rookies, whether they're a drafted player or an undrafted guy. Sorry I haven't been recording as much. There just really hasn't been much for me to talk about, so I've kind of just taken it as a bit of a break. But I'm back now. Training camp is around the corner. I'm not sure when this is going to come out. I'm assuming I'll probably put this out on the 24th. So veterans will be reporting to training camp on the 25th, so the next day. So I thought it'd be a good time before the veterans get involved to kind of talk about where I think our rookies stack up. Not just how good I think they are or how bad they are, but also where I think they fit on the roster. I'm going to be talking about the 4 players we drafted first, and then we'll get into the undrafted guys. And as you can see, with the undrafted guys, I kind of sorted them by position to make it a little bit smoother. So, anyway, starting right off with Cam Smith, we drafted him in the 2nd round. Very good player, obviously. From South Carolina, 6 foot, about 188 pounds. Very competitive, very physical player, plays with a lot of confidence. Some really good speed, loose hips, very quick feet, pretty patient player. For not being the biggest guy, he's actually a solid tackler. He stays poised, really good ball skills. Sometimes he'll try to hit rather than wrap up tackle, which can cause problems. And he can get a little bit over-aggressive at times, but I do really like him. Obviously, he's going to be making the team. We drafted him in the 2nd round. As far as how much he'll play this year, I don't know. I mean, you've got Xavier Howard, you've got Jalen Ramsey, obviously, as your top 2 corners. Jalen, probably the number 1, of course. Then you've got Kader Kohou and Nick Needham that are kind of battling it out for the nickel corner spot. It sounds like Kader Kohou's probably winning that fight. Then you have, Justin Bethel, who's also a really good player that stepped up for us in a major way. And also he is a special teams ace, so that's going to make it tough as well. It's kind of a weird situation, honestly. And then, of course, you've got Noah on the bubble as well. I mean, I assume he beats Noah. And it sounds like the coaches are going to try to get him on the field. I almost wish I should have... I don't know. Maybe I should have put like a tier between impact player and likely to make the 53, because he's for sure going to make the 53. I just don't know how big of an impact he's going to make year 1. And by the way, this is a year 1 ranking. I'm not talking about their overall career or anything like that. That is a whole different discussion. I'm just talking purely on what I think they're going to do this year. I think most likely our top 3 starting corners are going to be Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, and Kader Kohou. And then, I mean, Nick Needham might even take some snaps at safety potentially. I mean, we do have so many corners that might actually just be for the best. So maybe we slide him in there. I'll probably put him here, though. I just don't see how big of an impact he's really going to make this year. Just because that cornerback room is really stacked. He is a fantastic player and is probably the best player of all these rookies, potentially. But I don't know if he's going to make as much of an impact as one other player, because there's only one player on here that I think will be an actual impact player, and I'll go ahead and get into that. Devon Achane, running back from Texas A&M. So he's a much smaller guy, but he is extremely fast, fits this scheme very, very well. And despite him not being the biggest guy, he runs a lot of fearlessness, really good burst, very good complementary speed guy. I think he fits really well. We can use him kind of like a Raheem Mostert. And I think pairing him with like a Jeff Wilson is just going to make him that much better. Can be a very dangerous target out of the backfield. You can use him for gadget stuff as well, but that's not all he is. A very, very good player. I see him actually coming in and making an impact. I don't know if it'll be like week 1 necessarily, but running backs definitely can do that. So, I mean, who knows? Okay, so Elijah Higgins, I didn't like this pick at all. We drafted him in the 7th round. He's a tight end / receiver, going to be a tight end for us. He's 6'3", 235 pounds. Honestly, as a receiver, he had pretty average ball skills. It's decent for a tight end. Same with his route running. Honestly, I maybe as a development player, but I think Tanner Connor kind of does his job for him. It sounds like he's doing a little bit better than Tanner Connor in practice, but I don't really see either of them beating out Durham Smythe, Tyler Kroft, or Saubert. I just don't see that happening, and I think those 3 guys also fit this team a little bit better. And when I'll get to it later, but we have another rookie tight end that I actually think fits this scheme better than Elijah Higgins. I think he's an interesting prospect, but honestly, I don't see him. I don't know how many tight ends we're going to keep, but I think it's crazy to keep 4. I don't really see the purpose of keeping 4 tight ends in the modern NFL. I just don't. So honestly, I'd put him on the practice squad at best. He'll probably get snatched up if we do that, but I mean, maybe I'll put him here. He could be on the bubble if we're gonna really keep 4 tight ends like we did last year. But I mean, I hated it last year. I think it's stupid. Especially because he's not even a good blocker. I mean, for a wide receiver, he's a decent blocker, but now that he's moving to tight end, not so much. All right. Moving on to our last draft pick, offensive lineman Ryan Hayes. He's a tackle. He was a 2-year starter at Michigan at left tackle. He's 6'6", 298 pounds, so a little bit smaller. I would like to see him get a little bigger. But he does have some pretty good technique. Arm length is kind of lacking. Pretty athletic guy. I'd like to see him get a little bit lower. He's also not super strong. Feet are a little bit below average too. Range isn't great. But I do think he could be a decent backup tackle for us, especially in this scheme. The big thing is if he can beat out Isaiah Wynn or Kendall Lamb to be the backup tackle, preferably on the left side. I mean, that's the hope. I'm going to put him here. I actually do like him a lot better than Elijah Higgins. But it just comes down to he's got to beat out Isaiah Wynn or Kendall Lamb. So, I mean, it just makes sense that that's where he would be. Okay, so that's all of our draft picks. We only had 4 of them this year. Moving on to James Blackman, quarterback from Arkansas State. I don't like this guy. Not him personally. I don't know him personally, obviously. But I just don't think he's that good. I don't even really want him on the practice squad. I know Tua obviously has health concerns. And last year, Teddy and Skyler both got injured at different times too, and this offensive line is suspect, so I understand the idea of having a 4th quarterback. But I would rather sign a veteran like we did at the end of the year last year when we picked up Mike Lennon. I'd rather let a veteran ride the practice squad than James Blackman. If he does make the team, he likes RPOs. He's 6'5", about 190 pounds, so he's very skinny. Fast throwing motion, that's nice. Arm strength is very average. Does show the ability to throw with touch decently. Not very accurate, though. Ball placement is very lacking. Doesn't move in the pocket very well and isn't very athletic, so he's kind of a statue back there. I don't really see it. Like I said, he's not much of an athlete. Arm is average. I just don't see the appeal of him. I would rather just sign a veteran if we need to. I mean, if we really do end up losing Tua and Mike White, I'd rather just sign a quarterback at that point. So that's kind of my thoughts. I'm not a big fan of him. All right. Moving on, Chris Brooks, running back from BYU. He's 6'1", 219 pounds. Will absolutely lower his shoulder, and he always finds a way to fall forward and keep his legs moving. Those are things I really like. As far as his blocking goes, I'd say he's a willing blocker, but not a great one. Even though he is a little bit bigger, he's not necessarily as powerful as I would like, but he is very gritty. Not much of a receiving threat. He's pretty much just going to be a power runner, but he does have good vision, and he is a good inside run type of guy. I don't really know how well he fits our scheme, but other than Jeff Wilson, he's really the only running back we have with any kind of weight to him. We have some pretty small guys. So that could be something that could play a factor. As far as our running back room, we have Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, and Jeff Wilson as our 3 locked-in running backs. I don't know how many we're going to carry on the active roster. I would imagine probably 4. If we are going to try to run the ball as much as I hope we do. I assume we'll probably keep 1 more. We did keep 4 for a good part of last year. But that would mean that he would have to beat out either Myles Gaskin or Savon Ahmed, both of which have been on this team for a long time. I would hope that he could, and honestly, he'd probably have to beat both of them out to actually make the active roster. So that is a very tough climb. Most likely, I'd like to see him on the practice squad. But ideally, I would like him to somehow find a way to be better than Gaskin and Ahmed. That would be the ideal situation, just because Gaskin and Ahmed both have 1-year deals. So after this year, they'll be gone, and we could keep Chris Brooks for 3 years for dirt cheap as a backup running back. So if he can beat them, that would be ideal. But obviously, we want to keep the best players, not necessarily the most economic incentive. So I'll probably put him on practice squad. Well, I'll put him on fighting for a roster spot because, in my eyes, like he really should be fighting against Gaskin and Ahmed. I just don't think he's going to win it. But if not, I would like to see him on the practice squad. So, moving on, we've got Chris Coleman, wide receiver from Cal Poly. I'm going to kind of talk about him and David Davis at the same time because they're both undrafted wide receivers and they kind of apply to each other because, they're obviously going to be directly competing with each other for this roster spot. But I'll talk about Chris first. He's 5'11", 186 pounds, so he is a smaller guy. But despite that, he is a willing blocker. He's also obviously from a smaller college. Lines up outside and in the slot, but is most likely going to be a slot receiver at the NFL level. Very fast and shifty. I think he actually has some upside as a route runner. It's kind of raw there, but he does have some good hips. I think he could be potentially a solid return guy, pretty good yak player. It's a very tough battle with this receiving core, and that's going to be the case with David Davis as well. I'll go ahead and talk about what David Davis brings to the table before I go into the receiving core as a whole. David Davis is 6'2", 195 pounds from Western Kentucky. Also a willing blocker, but not a good one. Has some real speed to him. A pretty solid deep threat. With that speed and him being 6'2", that is nice. You can do some decent gadget stuff with him. He's not really a good route runner. That is where, in my opinion, Chris Coleman definitely beats him. He's really just fast and tall, and he doesn't handle physical corners very well. Doesn't deal with press very well. Maybe he makes the practice squad. But our receiving core is insane. I think that Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Robbie Anderson, Cedric Wilson, and Braxton Berrios are probably locked as our top 5 receivers. We'll most likely keep 1 more. And even then, on that 6th spot, it's insane. Like, you've got River Craycraft, who was very good for us last year when we needed him to be. You got Eric Izukama, who we drafted last year. We didn't really get to see anything from him. You got Freddie Swain, who's a veteran, but is probably not going to make the team. Braylon Sanders, who didn't get a whole lot of chances to actually play during the season, and when he did, it was less than spectacular. But last offseason he did very well and had some pretty good rapport with Tua. So he does kind of have that going for him. And then you have Chris Coleman and David Davis. I would rather, if it came down to it, I would rather keep Chris Coleman over David Davis, personally. I just don't know how they beat out Braylon Sanders, River Craycraft, and Eric Izukama. I would imagine River Craycraft probably makes the team over them. And also, River is also a pretty good blocker, which helps him too. So I don't know. I'm going to put them both on practice squad. I just don't see how either of them make this team. I would like to see one of them at least on the practice squad, though. But they might get snatched up. Who knows? If not, maybe Freddie Swain can be there. Braylon Sanders survived on the practice squad for most of last year, so who knows? But they got a pretty hard climb, I'm going to be honest. That being said, I almost think David Davis is probably likely off the team entirely because, like I said, I think Chris Coleman is better than him, and they both have a hard climb. So I don't know. But anyway, moving on. We've got Julian Hill, tight end from Campbell University. I mentioned earlier that there was a undrafted rookie tight end that I actually like better than Elijah Higgins, and this is him. He's 6'3", 252 pounds, pretty physical guy. Pretty decent hands and acceleration. Definitely not as fast as Elijah Higgins, that's for sure, but he does make some pretty decent contested catches. Focus drops are a bit of a problem. He has shown the ability to line up at H-back, though. He absolutely plays the whistle. He's a willing and very physical blocker. Technique could improve a little bit. But I do think that he is a much better blocker, and I think he fits this scheme a lot better than Elijah Higgins does. He also has a pretty decent understanding for zone coverage, and is pretty good at stopping in the gaps of the zone to make the quarterback's job a little bit easier, which is always a good thing. I think he could be a decent developmental piece. He's probably going to be a practice squad guy just because I don't see how he beats... Smythe is the starter, but I also don't think he beats Sauber or Croft, and I just don't see why we keep 4 tight ends on the active roster. It's probably going to be tough to beat out Tanner Connor or Elijah Higgins, but I just think he fits the scheme so much better. I like him better as a tight end than both of them. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, at least on this team in particular. This was the Kansas City Chiefs, where we're probably going to be throwing 90% of the time. It's not as big of a deal. But with the Miami Dolphins, and we're trying to run the ball more consistently, I think Julian Hill makes a little bit more sense. We did get rid of Mike Gesicki for a reason. So, anyway, moving on. James Tunstall, I don't know for sure how to pronounce his last name. I'm going to be real with you. But he's an offensive lineman from Cincinnati. He was a tackle in college, and it seems like that's where Miami is keeping him. I personally think he'd be a better guard. He's 6'7", 304 pounds. I don't think his hands are very great, and I also think he needs to use them more than he does. But he does have really good finish and is a pretty angry player, solid anchor, and is pretty strong. But I think his feet are lacking. He has shown the ability to climb a little bit. I seen him maybe as a backup guard, but Miami's listing him as a tackle, so I don't really know. I think he would fill in much better as a guard, just because if your feet are lacking, that is such a liability at tackle where you're going to be dealing with, speedy edge rushers. And I think he has the strength and anchor to deal with defensive tackles a little bit more. I don't think he's a starter at any point, but if he is at guard, I honestly think he has a chance to make the roster. I really do. But that being said, if he's going to be a tackle, I think he's practice squad at best. Just being perfectly honest. And here's the thing, too. If he were to play guard, if you think about our guard situation, we have Liam Eichenberg and Robert Hunt as our starting guards. Connor Williams is currently holding out, and Liam Eichenberg has been taking snaps at center just in case. So right now it'd probably be either him or Dan Feeney as the starting center, or another offensive lineman I'll get to in a moment. So that would leave us pretty light at guard. Obviously, we have Robert Jones, who stepped up. I think he should just be the starter over Liam. I just think he's a better player, personally. But then who fills his spot? And then there's also Lester Cotton, who I don't think is very good. I think James Tunstall has a better chance of beating Lester Cotton at guard than he has a chance of beating Isaiah Wynn, Lamb, or Ryan Hayes. That's just kind of my thoughts. But, hey, we're listing him as a tackle right now, so he's practice squad at best. If he's a guard, I think he's fighting for a roster spot, and if Connor Williams actually holds out, he's probably likely to make the 53. So I guess I'll average him out here, because he could swing from practice squad to up here, depending on the situation. So I guess I'll have it average it out in the middle, I suppose. So moving on, the other offensive lineman I just mentioned, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. Alama Uluave, maybe? Center from San Diego State. So I mentioned Connor Williams is currently holding out. We don't know if or when he's going to come back. So right now, Dan Feeney and him are the only two actual centers on this team. Liam Eichenberg is taking snaps at center. Just in case. But I don't know what to do with him. If Connor Williams comes back, I think that he's probably a practice squad player at best, if not off the team entirely. If Connor Williams holds out, he's definitely fighting with Dan Feeney for the roster spot. Depending on what we do with Liam Eichenberg, he could be on the 53. So I'll probably average him out in the middle. But he's 6'2", 305 pounds, pretty short arms. Hands are not great, but he does have good anchor. He does have a good anchor and, finishes pretty well. Has a tendency to get his hands outside, and he also leans more than I would like him to. But honestly, he really is a practice squad player. Honestly, if Connor Williams holds out, I would almost rather just sign a center than actually have to have this guy in the active roster. I'm gonna be real honest with you. Or, like I said, move James Tunstall to guard and move Liam Eichenberg to center. Or at least let James fight with Lester Cotton for the other guard spot. Because I think Robert Jones could absolutely hold it down as our starting left guard. I think he could. And actually, that would just leave a free guard spot. So, yeah. Then the backups would be James Tunstall and Lester Cotton. So, yeah, do that. if Connor Williams, doesn't come back. That's what I would do. So, anyway, moving on. Finally getting to defense. Randy Charlton, defensive lineman from Mississippi State. 6'3", 270 pounds, and despite him being a bigger guy, he's actually not super powerful and has a tendency to get moved. Does have a good motor, though, and for his size, he's actually got pretty decent ball get-off. But he has no plan of attack or any counters at all. Once he's blocked, he's blocked. He will squeeze and is a decent run defender, though. I do think he is a fun player. I just think he's pretty raw. As far as his position goes, I'll kind of talk about Anthony as well. Montalvo. Anthony Montalvo from UCF. He's 6'3", 290 pounds. They're kind of competing for the same spot, so I'll talk about them. Anthony uses his hands inside much more consistently, but he does need to get dudes off him a little bit more. Not as athletic, not super athletic, and not super strong either, but plays with some control. Might be able to challenge Jalen Twyman and Josiah Brunson, because I think that Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, and Emmanuel Ogba are locks. And then we'll probably keep one more. and that's going to be between Randy, Anthony, Jalen Twyman, and Josiah Bronson. I think that those four are probably going to fight for a spot. I personally like Anthony a little bit more, but whoever shows out, shows out. So I'll put them both on fighting for a roster spot. So, yeah. Now, we have another one that I actually think is going to be likely to make the roster, and that's Brandon Peely. Assuming that we don't sign any defensive tackles, any nose tackles, he's almost guaranteed because we only have 2 nose tackles. He's 6'3", 345 pounds. He's going to give you absolutely no value as a pass rusher at all. As a pass rusher, he's just going to run down the middle of people. He did tear his Achilles back in 2021, so that's a thing. He doesn't play with a ton of control, but he does have a good motor. I'm not, honestly, I don't know how well he's going to play for us. But right now, Raekwon Davis is our only other nose tackle, and he has a hard time staying healthy. So unless we sign somebody, I don't know how he doesn't make the active roster. Christian Wilkins plays nose tackle in a pinch sometimes when we need him to. But, I mean, this guy almost has to make it. Like, it just kind of is what it is. I'm going to go ahead and put Cam Smith on impact player just because I think it's weird that him and Brandon Peely are in the same tier. I just do. But know that I think Devon A-Chain is probably going to be better than him. So, yeah. Moving on to edge. We've got kind of a few people to talk about here. So we've got Mitchell Agude, I think is how you pronounce it, whatever. He's 6'5", 255 pounds from the University of Miami, so he's homegrown, which is nice. Needs to rush with the plan a little bit more, doesn't really have too many counters, not super great in the run game. Like to see him get a little bit lower, but he does have a good build, very long, has really good burst. Kind of a ball of clay type of guy, a lot of really good physical traits. And so far, his offseason has been very good. The problem is our edge rusher room is pretty deep. I'll talk about the other 2 players before I get into that. We also have Garrett Nelson from Nebraska, 6'3", 249 pounds. Very good motor, very powerful, very angry player. Not super athletic or bursty. He's a guy that can play edge and linebacker, which I think is going to give him and another guy a pretty good advantage. So we'll see with that. I think he's going to need to prove himself on special teams. Very tough player. 3-year starter and a team captain, which is nice. He's not very long and needs to get people off of him a little bit more consistently. But like I said, he is a very strong, violent player who's pretty fun to watch, quite frankly. And then last, there's Aubrey Miller, another edge rusher that also plays linebacker. He's 6'2", 225 pounds, so smaller. Been playing pretty well in practice as well. Very smooth athlete from Jackson State. Solid tackling, good downhill blitzer. Pretty solid in coverage for a linebacker as well. A leader on his team. Struggles at tackling in space sometimes and can get misled a little bit. So I do think he's a little bit raw, but I think he has a lot of special teams potential and a really good coverage guy. And he's because of his speed, he does give you value as an edge rusher as well. I just think that him and Garrett Nelson's versatility is going to really give them an advantage, but also Mitchell's been really showing out at practice. But here's the thing. We have Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Malik Reed, and Andrew Van Ginkel that are probably locks. Then you've got Cameron Good, Aubrey Miller, Mitchell Agude, and Garrett Nelson. They're all likely fighting for a spot. If there is one. I don't know how many edge rushers we're going to keep. Cameron Good, obviously we drafted last year, so he kind of has that going for him as far as football politics go. So I don't really know. Even though Mitchell has been probably... I mean, Garrett Nelson's also really been showing out in practice as well. So it's really tough. I don't know what happens with Mitchell. But I'll put him on fighting for a roster spot if he's good enough to where they really want to have a fifth edge rusher. But in my eyes, if you're gonna have a fifth edge rusher, you may as well have one that also plays linebacker. So that would kind of lean toward Garrett Nelson, who's also been very good at practice, or Aubrey Miller, again, who's also been pretty good at practice. So it's tough. It really is. I'll put them both in that position. I'll talk about Zeke Vandenberg in a moment because his situation is a little bit different. But I do kind of think that Aubrey Miller's ability to be good in coverage and have that athleticism is going to give him an advantage, but he's also a lot smaller. That's a tough fight, man. I don't know who wins that. Like I said, I want to lead toward Garrett Nelson or Aubrey Miller just because they do have the linebacker versatility. But, man, it's a tight room. Because linebacker is a lot lighter than edge is. At linebacker, you've got Jerome Baker, who's pretty solid. I know there's a lot of Dolphins fans that aren't a big fan of him, but I do think he's a solid player. David Long is a guy we picked up this year. Very good player, but he has a very hard time staying healthy, so you're going to need linebacker depth. Channing Tindall, very talented player. We drafted him last year in the 3rd round, but haven't really seen him play a whole lot. He's a pretty raw player when we drafted him, so who knows where we're at with him. Then you got Duke Riley. Not really a big fan of him, I'm going to be quite honest with you. And then you've got Garrett Nelson, Aubrey Miller, and Zeke Vandenberg. And speaking of Zeke Vandenberg, his situation's weird. He was placed on IR for an undisclosed reason. So that's probably going to hold him back. And again, even if that wasn't the case, I'd probably keep one of the linebackers that, also play edge. But he is a good player. He's 6'3", 233 pounds, good motor, good instincts, not super athletic. And because he isn't that fast, I do think he should get a little bit bigger. Would need to prove himself on special teams, but if he's hurt, he really can't do that. He does have some strength to him, though. I'll put him on the practice squad. But here's the thing. If he is injured this year, it might actually benefit him in a way. Because if he misses this whole season and we just kind of keep him on our IR, then maybe next offseason he can develop a little bit more. He gets to stay with the team a little bit. I mean, who knows? That could help him in the end. But also, I don't know how many linebackers we're going to keep. I would personally like to keep either Aubrey Miller or Garrett Nelson, if not both, just because they do have that edge rusher versatility to them. And like I said, I do think they could be pretty good special teams players, especially Aubrey Miller. So if I was going to pick one, I'd probably pick Aubrey. But anyway, that was long-winded. Moving on to defensive back, we've got cornerback Ethan Bonner from Stanford, 6'1", 190 pounds. Did very well at his pro day. Very athletic player. Can't stay healthy to save his life, I will say that. But definitely has the speed and length to be an interesting player. Not very good in man or zone coverage, though. I'm going to be quite honest. He's really just a ball of clay athlete. But he could be a decent development piece. But our cornerback room is insane. Like I mentioned with Cam Smith. We've got Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, Kader Kohu, Cam Smith, Nick Needham, Noah Igbenogany, Justin Bethel, Trill Williams, Keon Crossan, Tino Ellis, Bryce Thompson, and Ethan Bonner himself. That is a tough room. I would say that Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Cater Coe, Cam Smith are absolutely locked in. So that's 4 spots right there. Nick Needham gives us versatility at free safety and is a very good player, so he's probably safe. Justin Bethel is a special teams ace, and when we needed him to come in at corner last year because of injuries, he absolutely did very well. So I think he's pretty much safe. So that's 6 corners right there. Now, how many corners are you going to keep? That's really what determines if there's even a spot for him. But let's say there is. Let's say they decide to keep 7, maybe 8. I mean, does he beat the other people? I mean, Noah Igbenogany is not great, but he's been here a while. Trill Williams, before he got hurt last year, was showing out in preseason and training camp and was seeming like a really good player. Tino Ellis has some talent to him. Keon Crossan, when he had to step up last year, he played pretty decently. So it's pretty tough. I mean, I don't see how he beats. I don't know between him and Bryce Thompson, but I don't know if it matters. I don't see him really making this team. Period. Even the practice squad, I see some of these other people being on the practice squad before him. Maybe he does just because corner is such an important position. Who knows? But whatever. Moving on, we got some safeties. We've got Keidron Smith from Kentucky and Bennett Williams from Oregon. Keidron Smith first. He's 6'2", 203 pounds. He was a cornerback in college, but I think he is going to be a safety at the NFL level. That seems to be where they are putting him, and I think that's for the best. Not super fast and has some pretty tight hips. Because of that, he's not the greatest in coverage. But he is pretty strong and physical, really solid tackler. Anticipation could get a little bit better, but I think moving to safety where he can see things a little bit clearer, I think should help him. I think playing strong safety is probably going to be his best bet. I do think he has a good mentality for special teams as well. But I also think Bennett Williams is also a pretty similar player. He's a DB, most likely going to be a strong safety. From Oregon, 6 foot, 205 pounds. Keep him as a run support player, not super athletic, and because of that, he's not great in coverage. Going to need to prove himself on special teams, just like Keidron Smith. Good tackler. I don't know. The safety room, I think Javon Holland, Brandon Jones, and Deshaun Elliott are probably our locks at safety. And then it kind of comes down to how many safeties are we going to keep. And this also kind of opens up the cornerback discussion, because if we keep Nick Needham and maybe move him to free safety, like roster-wise, if he's technically both, then that also throws a wrench in it. And then also, after the first 3 I mentioned, you also have Elijah Campbell, who was pretty decent when we needed him to play last year. Same with Verone McKinley. So it's kind of a weird situation. I like Keidron Smith a little bit better than Bennett Williams. I hope that we can keep at least one of them on the practice squad. Safety's pretty important, especially for special teams. I'll probably put them both there. But I don't really see either of them beating out Verone McKinley or Elijah Campbell. I mean, maybe Elijah, I don't know. But Verone McKinley has an advantage just because he's a free safety, and those are kind of hard to find. So, I don't know. I really don't. And last but not least, we have Michael Turk, the punter from Oklahoma. I think he is absolutely fighting for a roster spot. Him and Jake Bailey are the only punters on the team. Michael Turk is 6 foot, 227 pounds, so pretty damn big for a punter. Ran a 4.83 40, which isn't super fast for NFL standards overall, but for a punter, that's pretty solid, and he's a pretty athletic player. Fantastic power in his leg, a very powerful leg. But I do think control and accuracy is definitely something that it's going to need to improve. His hang time seems to have been getting better as well. I seen him as a guy that could have been potentially drafted in the 7th round. and I definitely thought he would make it to camp with somebody. I'm happy it's us. Jake Bailey, we picked him up from the Patriots. Jake Bailey was once a Pro Bowler, but had a back injury, and since then has had a lot of... He's been struggling a lot. So I would say that Michael Turk and Jake Bailey in preseason and camp just fight for that spot, and whoever makes the team, whoever wins is on the team, the other is out. I mean, it really is just that simple. So, yeah. Anyway, I'd love to hear all of your opinions on these players. And anybody who's ranked low, I hope they prove me wrong. Because at the end of the day, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and I would like all of our players to be Pro Bowlers, if I could have that. Is that likely? Probably not. But, this is just kind of my opinions. And like I said, this isn't even always just about who I think is the better players, but also where they fit within the schemes, where I think they fit in with where our roster is at. I think that plays a lot into it as well. Like I kind of mentioned and kind of spoke about, I think that Aubrey Miller is a much better player than either of the undrafted offensive linemen we have. But the offensive linemen are probably more likely to make this team. It just kind of is what it is. I also think Aubrey Miller is better than Elijah Higgins. So, who knows? But anyway, like I said, I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. This video is already long enough. So, yeah, anyway. If you like this video, I appreciate hitting that like button. If you have any questions or comments in the comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.